Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so from the previous discussion, it was the second canto, chapter 9, and we were going through the Chatushloki. And whilst we did the Chatushloki, we also felt that we would do a recap simply because of the fact that it is an important, very important chapter which is going to lay the foundation. So today what we would do is we will go through the verses, we'll take as many questions as possible. I was just wanting to say that because I'm using my phone, I may not be able to toggle between the chat and everything else. So if you do want to ask questions, please unmute yourself during the question and answer session, and you can ask questions by just unmuting yourself. Please don't write questions on chat. I can't see them. Yeah, I just don't want to disturb this because I'm using my phone for the first time, so it's a bit limited. So the previous chapter, the previous session, we focused on wanting to touch upon the Chatushloki. Before we begin a discussion on the Chatushloki, one of the important aspects is that this is basically the Chatushloki itself is the foundation of the Srimad Bhagavatam that was given as a gist to answer the questions of Lord Brahma by Lord Narayan himself. Narayana himself answered these questions of Lord Brahma to give a gist of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these 4 verses are the gist of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, and they are basically giving you a view of the entire Bhagavatam, and it is being answered by Lord Narayan himself. What is very important for us to also realize is that the position of Srila Vyasadeva is extraordinary. It is said that the realizations that Srila Vyasadeva had overall into aspects of Sambandha, Videya, Prayojana, and the aspects of everything that included the spiritual as well as different levels of consciousness and the corresponding deities, the way he arranged everything. All of this was incomparable because even Lord Brahma and the other demigods did not have this knowledge. The reason why Srila Vyasadeva could offer his realizations was because he was Narayana himself. He was Sriman Narayana himself. He was an incarnation of Narayan. As a consequence, because he was an incarnation of the Lord himself, his depth and his view of the beyond in terms of the spiritual sky had no comparison. In fact, the quality of his realizations and his view and his personal factual realization is there's no comparison to it at all. Even Lord Brahma, his view of this entire creation and beyond, and knowledge of the Lord and his avatars, etc., all of this was somewhat limited compared to what Srila Vyasadeva knew. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is practically, I would say, a crystallized, or I would say a condensed version of Srila Vyasadeva's realizations. It is said that in the Sandarbhas of Srila Jiva Goswami, he wrote that initially there was one Veda, which is the Yajur Veda. From the Yajur Veda, Srila Vyasadeva extracted Itihasa. Itihasa is history. He extracted the Puranas, which were the different stories from Yajur Veda. And then he also extracted the poems. So there were poems, there were Itihasa, which is history, and then there was also the Purana, different stories. All of these was extracted from the original Yajur Veda. After extracting these stories and after extracting all of the different from the Yajur Veda, Srila Vyasadeva basically split the Veda into 4 parts, which was he made the Yajur Veda into Yajur, Rig, Sama, and Atharva. So the Puranas and the Itihasas are from the original Yajur Veda. So they are practically a part of the original Yajur Veda. So in other words, there's no difference between the Puranas and the original Vedas. And the Puranas themselves are supposed to be, in one sense, realized knowledge that is supposed to enable one to understand Vedic knowledge clearly. And these Puranas are considered by many to be the cream of Vedic knowledge. In other words, if one rejects the Puranas, which is the Agni Purana, Skanda Purana, Varaha Purana, etc., then one is practically condemned to a life of, I would say, birth after birth of, not being able to understand anything which is of a sublime nature. So the point being that all these Puranas that were extracted by Srila Vyasadeva from the Yajurveda, then he splits the Veda into 4 parts, essentially establishing the fact that the Puranas and the Vedas themselves are of the same level. Now, what is very, very important for us to understand is that as he splits all of these and as he does the compilation, Veda, Veda is basically what we understand as the scripture. Now, Vyasa literally means to divide. Yeah? Vyasa means to divide. So one who divides the Vedas is considered to be Veda Vyasa. Yeah? So does it make sense? It is Veda Vyasa is one who divides. Vedas, Vyasa is to divide. Yeah? So what we need to understand is that basically Srila Vyasadeva extracted the Puranas from the original Yajurveda and he distributed and kind of divided the Vedas into 4 different parts. And these Puranas themselves are considered to be far more sublime and far more important than the original Vedic knowledge. This is the conclusion of our Acharyas. This is the conclusion of Srila Jiva Goswami. Now, the point being, he goes on to establish that the Puranas themselves shouldn't be neglected. Even though the Puranas contain, I would say, glorification of different demigods, demigoddesses. For example, we have Skanda Purana, we have Shiva Purana, we have Devi Purana, Durga Purana, glorifying Devi. There is Saraswati. There are so many different Puranas that are basically attributed to the different demigods and demigoddesses as well. But Srila Jiva Goswami is very clear that these are all being extracted from the Yajurveda and they are all sublime, and to the point where they're all basically superior to the Vedas, because the Puranas and the Itihasas give us a view of the original Vedic knowledge, which is incomparable. So one can't reject the Puranas and the Itihasas and then go for the regular Vedas, because they themselves wouldn't make any sense, because this is of a sublime nature. Why are we sharing this here? Because from here, the Puranas themselves, they are, again, of different categories. You have the mode of goodness, you have the mode of passion, you have the mode of ignorance. You have 3 different divisions of Puranas. These are all being created for those who have different levels of consciousness, but all of them could fall under the same umbrella of the Vedic knowledge. And as a consequence, as they upgrade their consciousness by following the teachings and receiving the mercy of the deities whom they follow sincerely, then they get upgraded year after year and lifetime after lifetime to different levels of consciousness. So the point being that if you're all connected to the same root or same, I would say, tree, the ability to traverse and to be able to jump from one branch to the other to the higher branch is much easier than if you were to be outside of it. As a consequence, all consciousness and different degrees of consciousness is accommodated within the Puranas. Amongst all these Puranas, the sublime truth, the greatest of all Puranas, that has absolutely nothing to do with being able to attain karma kanda, which is fruitive results. It has nothing to do with being able to even go after a somewhat lower bar, which is moksha, which is leaving this world. So one who wants desires in the world, that's fruitive desires, karma kanda. There are those who have enjoyed these fruitive desires, but also understand there's great suffering in this world. They want to leave this world. Both categories are considered to be one level below the supreme desire to serve. As a consequence, Bhagavatam does not even attain, or rather cater to the abilities of these 2 agendas in terms of wanting to fulfill personal desires versus wanting to basically, leave the world. As a consequence, Srimad Bhagavatam is called Amala Purana. Amala means it is unsullied, it's pure, because it is not touched by the objectives of either wanting to satisfy one's material desires, neither does it basically cater to those who want to basically have an objective of just departing from the material creation, because all of this is being touched by the other 18 Puranas. So Srimad Bhagavatam particularly is considered to be of realizations after one has digested the 18 Puranas, which essentially means one has digested the Vedas. Now, this conversation of Srimad Bhagavatam itself is considered to be the mature fruit that is being offered by Srila Vyasadeva. And again, who is Srila Vyasadeva? Srila Vyasadeva, again, as we go back, is Krishna himself. Because he is Krishna himself, he has a window, he has an opportunity to see things that no one else can practically see. Please understand that this is a very unique opportunity for Srila Vyasadeva. He is practically Narayan himself. Because he is Narayan, the realizations he has of the entire creation and beyond is practically incomparable. Now, all of those realizations are pratyaksha. What does it mean? Sriman Narayana, as he sees, he is writing. As Srila Vyasadeva is seeing, he is capturing. So we need to be very, very clear that Srila Vyasadeva particularly is of the category of the Supreme Lord himself. As a consequence, he is able to capture realizations. He is able to capture so many different aspects of who he is. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that this particular offering of Srila Vyasadeva of the Srimad Bhagavatam has truths and realizations that you can never find anywhere else. This is basically because he is Narayana himself. You know, it is like himself. He is basically the creator, he's maintainer, he's the destroyer. He is practically the origin, the middle, and the end. And as a consequence, he has a view which nobody else has. When we use the word realization, we got to realize when we use the word realization, it means factual realization. Factual realization falls in the category of being able to see things. Pratyaksha. You see, there is no inference that is being made because, you know, I can smell something behind the curtains. It smells like roses, so there must be a rose bush behind the curtain. This is an inference. You know, who knows whether there's a rose bush or a rose essence bottle or rose perfume that's open behind the curtain. Who knows whether all of this is possible? Yeah, we don't. We basically know that there's a smell wafting from behind the curtains. It smells of roses. There's a possibility of a rose bush. Now, this is inference, and this inference has some truth, but it doesn't have all the truth in that particular statement. But someone who goes behind the curtain has a look, is able to see if it's a perfume bottle that has rose essence. They're able to see if it's a rose bush. They're able to see if it is, you know, a perfume. They're able to see what is truly there. As a consequence, they have a better understanding. This is pratyaksha. When someone like that writes after seeing, then we have to understand that that personality who has written after seeing is practically representing the absolute truth. And when we come in touch with such scripture, that scripture has the ability to change. Yeah, this is not a random issue. It is not some random statement. It is literal. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I was telling him how holding the Srimad Bhagavatam in our hands and reading Srimad Bhagavatam, just coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, is practically, because Srimad Bhagavatam is conscious, it is Krishna himself. It has been written by Krishna himself, which is Vyasadeva. It has the ability to plug us into an eternal experience like no other scripture has. No other scripture. So this is very, very powerful. As a consequence, what we are trying to say is, this is pratyaksha. Imagine this. Just imagine what we are being given a window. It is said that in the realm of the demigods, the Puranas have 1 billion verses. Just think of this. 1 billion verses is what the Puranas have. The Puranas, the original version of the Puranas, has 1 billion verses in the realm of the demigods. It is still existing. But when it was presented here 5,000 years back by Srila Vyasadeva, he took a gist. A gist of the billion was 400,000 verses. Chatush lakshaha. Chatush lakshaha is the word that is being used, which means there are 4 lakh or 400,000 verses which have been extracted from the Puranas. But in reality, they represent a sample of 1 billion verses that exist in the demigods' realms. Okay? This is basically a fascinating account that what we have here is a very minute percentage of the original offering. And the very minute percentage itself is so vast that you need several lifetimes to digest it. Now, the 400,000 verses here, not every one of us have been completely, well-versed in them, but these verses are present in the material world, and some of them have been lost. Yeah. Whenever they are lost, Srila Vyasadeva appears and then he rewrites them. He injects this knowledge back into the world. Now imagine this, that the billion verses that exist in the realm of the demigods, they have been condensed in one sense by the same personality, Srila Vyasadeva, who felt despondent after condensation. He actually felt quite despondent. He felt that his lifetime was wasted. Imagine being Srila Vyasadeva, who is an incarnation of the Supreme, and he starts feeling that his entire life was a big waste. He was feeling despondent. Yeah. And this despondent personality basically found a solution to end his despondency. And that despondency was ended by authoring the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the cream of all this work. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is not the cream of 400,000 verses of the Puranas that you find in this world. Srimad Bhagavatam is the cream of 1 billion verses that exist in the realm of the demigods. So this is not a simple thing. And someone who wrote those billion verses after realizing them factually is the author of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the 12 cantos that have been authored by Srila Vyasadeva, where we are coming in touch with his presentation, is actually a sublime, concentrated, condensed version and the essence of 1 billion verses of the Puranas, which in themselves are extracted from the original Yajurveda before it became split into 4 different Vedic, I would say, blocks. So this is fascinating. First, there was the Yajurveda. From the Yajurveda, Srila Vyasadeva extracted the Puranas, the Kavyas, he extracted the Itihasas, he extracted all of these, and that became the Puranas, Kavyas, and Itihasas. Then he split the original Yajurveda into 4 parts that became the Yajur, Rig, Sama, and Atharva. The original Puranas, Itihasas, and Kavyas, all of them amounted to 1 billion verses. Can you believe this? The original Kavyas and Itihasas and Puranas, they amounted to 1 billion verses that still exist in the realm of the demigods. These billion verses still exist in the realm of the demigods. See here is that 5,000 years back, a condensed version was provided as what we can digest, and that's 400,000 verses. These are the Puranas. Of these 400,000, which are originally the representative of the billion, which is originally a representative of what was found in the Yajurveda, made Srila Vyasadeva feel as if he had wasted his journey of life. What came out of such despondency to make someone like him, who was the personality of God himself, happy and basically thrilled about what he had to offer was the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now imagine this in the context that there are 4 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam that are supposed to represent the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Can you imagine this? So the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam represent the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. The entire Srimad Bhagavatam is the sublime, supermost, pure offering of Srila Vyasadeva compared to the other billion verses that he had written. Yeah? So he had already written 1 billion verses. Of those billion verses, Srimad Bhagavatam's 12 cantos are the most sublime offering. Of that sublime offering, you have 4 verses to the Chatushloki. Can you imagine how important the Chatushloki is and how much stress has been given and how fascinating it is to see that you could take the essence of 1 billion verses and then encapsulate them in 4 verses.
Yeah.
You could just encapsulate them in 4 verses and basically, you could basically present them as the most sublime offering. It's fascinating to see this. Now, in the 4 verses, we did whatever we accomplished in the previous session. We want to go over it again because in the previous session, I believe there were, I wouldn't really say that there was, in the sense that we could cover everything in detail, but we presented it for the first time. So perhaps it might just assist us in being able to present it again. Okay. Now, let's just look at the 4 verses. Now, I want you to keep in mind the context, which is the reason why we spoke of the origin of the Puranas. We spoke of the extent of the Puranas that's available in the realm of the demigods. We spoke of what was given to us 5,000 years back. And then we are talking about the mission of Srimad Bhagavatam being so different from what was offered by Srila Vyasadeva. The mission of Srimad Bhagavatam is sublime because it is uncontaminated by fruitive desires, or objectives of fruitive desires. There isn't a plan here to offer fruitive desires. In other words, there isn't a bunch of, I would say, verses or sacrificial methodology that could eventually allow one to attain a fruitive desires. There isn't a focus here on just merely taking the soul and placing the soul beyond the Mahatattva, beyond the Viraja river. There isn't that objective either. The objective of the Srimad Bhagavatam is to offer sambandha. Practically, the objective of the Srimad Bhagavatam is to take our hand and place it on Krishna's hand. Literally, take Krishna's hand and place it on our hand. This is done by a series of steps. The series of steps is being delineated in the 9th chapter. We looked at it. Sorry, the particular chapter of the 2nd canto, which is the 9th chapter. The series of steps is one needs to have factual realization. One needs to find someone who is carrying this factual realization in the heart. So as a consequence now, because Srila Vyasadeva, who is the Lord himself, carries this factual realization, we need to go and find someone who is connected to Srila Vyasadeva, which is where the quest of a guru starts. The idea of a guru is one who is connected to Srila Vyasadeva, and Srila Vyasadeva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He is practically Narayana. Without his ability, even Lord Brahma doesn't have the extent of knowledge Srila Vyasadeva had. He has a very unique position in terms of understanding the spiritual sky, because the spiritual sky is not open to everyone. And he had a very unique understanding of the material sky. He had an understanding of different levels of consciousness, which essentially means that one, you should understand nescience. Nescience, ignorance has to be understood. Then you need to be able to take that ignorance and then advance it through a series of proper steps and align it to the original thought so that that particular nescience gets transformed into purity. So you offer Puranas and different pujas, rituals, demigods, demigoddesses who can handle that and then connect the soul to that personal personality. He is practically an engineer of the journey of the Atma throughout the material and the spiritual realm. You can't imagine the role of Srila Vyasadeva. It is uncomparable. It is practically fascinating to see that this is only accomplished by Krishna himself. He appears as Guru. So he's coming with factual realization. He has the ability to connect the lowest level of consciousness and also the highest level of consciousness, depending, he's able to give them each what they need for them to move forward. And he also has the ability to basically give us a glimpse into things that have never been seen. Now, we need to find a representative who comes in the line of Vyasadeva. That is the first step of the Chatushloki. You need to find a representative who comes in the lineage of Vyasadeva. That's our business. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to have factual realization of the spiritual sky. Doesn't mean he has seen the truth. It means he accepts the seer of truth, Srila Vyasadeva, and his teachings as sublime, as supreme. So someone in the lineage of Vyasadeva who has received faith from his predecessor, who ultimately has received faith from his predecessor, going back all the way to Srila Vyasadeva. Each and every guru speaks, and when they speak, there is transformation of the chitta. Yeah? Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Kori Aikya. There is a transformation of consciousness due to sound vibration received in disciplic succession all the way from Srila Vyasadeva. So the factual realizations of Vyasadeva are being passed on, and this is basically called Krishna Sambandha. Krishna Sambandha at the level of Srila Vyasadeva, all the way down to the spiritual masters who have been initiating in our lines, who are all connected to Srila Vyasadeva. So the first step in realization of Sambandha Gyan is to find someone who is factually connected to a lineage of Srila Vyasadeva. As a consequence, we would be able to tap into what Srila Vyasadeva has to offer. And as a consequence, we would be able to connect ourselves, plug ourselves into this stream of mercy that's going to come down from Srila Vyasadeva. This is Sambandha. This is Sambandha. As a consequence, Sambandha Gyan, when we use the word Sambandha Gyan or realize to Krishna, that knowledge comes from the heart of the Guru. So Krishna himself is saying in the Chatushloki, you need to find someone who has factual realization. Yeah, he tells Brahma, I will give you factual realizations. Our basic parampara starts from Lord Brahma. Yeah, so basically he is giving him factual realizations. So let's look at verse 33. He says, Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation when there was nothing but myself, nor was there material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. So when we talk about Sambandha, there are two parties involved. One is one, which is the soul, which is the jiva, which is us. And then there is the beloved. The beloved is Narayana. So the first step in Sambandha Gyan is where Narayana himself says that I exist in the beginning, in the middle, and I'm also existing after the fact. So this is the first step of God realization. What does this mean? It means essentially that there is an original personality who is eternal, Sat. And when we plug into and we establish a process of connecting to this original through sadhana, then we are on an eternal path. Go back again to the statements that I made about the availability of Puranas for different levels of consciousness. There are different levels of consciousness, and for different levels of consciousness, there are different Puranas. Now, we have been given Srimad Bhagavatam by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what we are trying to do is basically engage in the activities of coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. We are coming in touch with the seva of the deities. We are coming in touch with the chanting of Harinam. We are coming in touch with the realized knowledge that is coming from the sadhus, which practically is coming in touch with those who are users in the path. We want to come and roll in the dust of Raja. We want to roll in the dust of Mayapur, because that is where the realm, the eternal realm exists. Yeah. So the point being that we are basically being connected to the eternal process, and we need to understand that there is factually someone who is existing in the spiritual sky who is eternal. And we use the word eternal, meaning Sat. Sat means that which does not change. This statement basically establishes Sat. I exist before, I exist during, I exist after. He doesn't change. This is Sat. Establishing our connections to Sat is being established here. This is Sambandha Gyan, first step. Yeah. So this is the first step of the Chatushloki. Now let's go to the next one. The next verse is verse 34. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. It's my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So here again, Krishna is saying, yes, understand that I'm the object of your love. I'm eternal. So if you're looking for eternity, you have to plug into processes that would connect you to me. The next step he's saying, if you don't eat, sleep, mate, defend with me in perspective, then you basically are connecting to illusion. In other words, you make a plan based on the body, the senses. You make a plan based on what you see outside, which is unrelated to Krishna. You're practically moving away from Sat to Asat. Sat is eternal. Asat is that which is not true, which essentially means it is subject to change, it is subject to destruction. So here, he is practically saying, if you have anything to do, it has to be doing with me. There has to be a connection with me. That is the reason why, if you notice in our samskara books, be it marriage, be it the birth ceremony, be it conception, Garbha Adana. Garbha Adana. Garbha is the womb. Adana means to impact the womb. Yeah, the impacting of the womb is Adana. It is not Garbhadana. It is basically two different words, Garbha and Adana. Adana is to impact the womb. Impact the womb with the fertilized, egg. That's basically the ceremony, which is the Garbha Adana. Now, the point is that we notice that every one of these samskaras that we have to go through has Krishna involved in them, because we are invoking the presence of Vishnu. That is being done with this knowledge that if you do not do things in this world that are directly related to me, or if you have no knowledge that they are related to me, if you plan for things in life where you can't really clearly see a path leading to me, then you are basically engaging with my illusory energy. This is Sambandha Gyan number 2. First, you know what is Sat. Now you're being told what is nescience, What is the nature of illusion? What is the nature of activities in this world? So he is wanting us to distinguish the two. This is also sambandha. Yeah, sambandha is to know what is true. Sambandha is also to know what is not true. So what is sat, what is eternal, and what is asat? That is being explained in this verse. Now let's just go on to the third verse. I'm going a little fast because we can always have questions. Now the third verse is Yata Mahanti Bhutani Bhuteshvashe Anu Pravishtani Apravishtani Tatateshu Nateshu Aham. O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos, and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created, and at the same time am outside of everything. So this requires a little understanding. Now consider this. Consider that the entire creation is 100%. Yeah, in terms of percentage terms, the entire creation is 100%, of which 25% is considered to be material, 75% is considered to be spiritual. The 25% that is considered to be material is simply a matter of what we would call as the overpowering or the entrance of the material elements into the cosmos. So try to understand it. What exists before is the spiritual sky. What exists after the entry of the material elements is you have 75% spiritual and you have 25% which is material. Okay, so what we call ourselves into is the 25%. We are in the 25%. And our little universe is minuscule because there are billions of universes in the 25%. You can just imagine that if you were to simply theoretically say that there's a number 100, 25 of 100 is material and 75 of 100 is spiritual. So in reality, the 25 also exists in the spiritual sky, but it is overwhelmed by a different kind of energy. And that energy is the material elements, the universal elements. That is Krishna's illusory energy. That is the material energy. Now, what he is saying in this verse is that, yes, for someone who has, by the way of consciousness, risen above the material elements and he's in the spiritual sky, the cosmos doesn't affect him. In other words, even if you're in a body which is made of the 5 elements, the body itself doesn't affect you if your consciousness is elevated and has gone to the spiritual sky. It is a factual experience. Yeah, it is a factual experience. Devotees, even with 1 or 2 years of Krishna consciousness, have the ability to experience spiritual versus material. They can understand that their own anxieties have gone away. They can understand that their desires have changed. They can perceive that they like a certain kind of lifestyle versus they're rejecting certain kind of lifestyle. You can see changes come through because now the devotee, the Atma, is plugging into a higher level of consciousness and is rejecting a lower level of consciousness. Param drishtva nivartate. We are replacing what is higher. We are replacing what is lower with a higher taste. And this is due to consciousness. So what Krishna is saying in this third thing is, yes, you're overwhelmed by the material elements. You're sitting in a gross body, and this gross body is extraordinarily cumbersome because it has these 5 elements. And in reality, to be honest, a lot of people talk to me personally, and what I do say is that these 5 elements, in these 5 elements, people face all kinds of mental and physical ailments. In reality, karma is nothing but a displacement of the 5 elements. There's a distortion at the time of the being. When the soul comes into being, into one of the material bodies, and they come into being, that particular time frame, you will notice, that, which is the time of birth. The time of birth of a person literally reflects the distortion that is seen in the 5 different material elements. This is what we call Panchanga. Panchanga literally means 5 different limbs. It covers the 5 different elements. And the whole idea of finding a good auspicious time is to look into the Panchanga and to find a good auspicious time is to find a time where these 5 material elements are not extraordinarily disturbed because they would distort the experience of the person. This is the whole concept of trying to find what we would call a good muhurta. You see, they say, oh, we have to find a good auspicious time for doing things. This is what is being done. And Krishna is saying very clearly here that yes, the universal elements are entering into the cosmos, which essentially means that you as Atma will be overwhelmed by these universal elements. We are trapped in these bodies made of these universal elements. However, one who becomes Krishna conscious has the ability to get themselves liberated from this particular predicament because they are not overpowered by this body. You can see this. Even Sikh devotees have a different perspective of life compared to a Sikh person in general. So what I'm trying to say is, if you compare two people, someone who has had very good devotional experience would be able to process the extraordinary overpowering of the material elements very differently compared to someone who has not experienced Krishna consciousness. This is what is being explained in this verse. Ultimately, when one has reached a level of purity where they are able to overcome the influence of the material elements, they can be in one of these bodies and they can function as if the body doesn't affect them. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada at the age of 69, he was very strong. But then imagine at the age of 69 going around the world 108 times, having to sleep 4 hours, translate, having the power to deal with very young, enthusiastic devotees, but they needed a lot of training, being able to organize an entire kind of preaching movement throughout the world. You can just imagine, this has nothing to do with the material body. No one in the material body will have this kind of capacity at that age. It's factually impossible. It's very difficult to do this. This was a pure soul empowered by Krishna who practically did not operate within the boundaries of the physical body, and he was able to accomplish things which were unreal in those 10 years. This is something that you can visually relate to in Prabhupada's journey. The fact being, available to each and every one of us. Srila Prabhupada never gave a system that's only applicable to him. If Srila Prabhupada had given a system that is only going to make him pure, we are not doing the right thing. In other words, we are not really in the right system. Srila Prabhupada's system was to liberate and give the same experience that he had to everyone else. That's why it's so powerful. It's powerful because it has the ability to give the same or similar experiences to every jiva who comes in touch with Srila Prabhupada's system. Now, that is what is being spoken of by Krishna. He's saying the universal elements are entering into this universe. They can overpower you because they can be distorted. You have ruined the way the universal elements are going to be influencing you because of different actions and reactions. Our own karma can distort how they're going to play with us in this lifetime. Yeah? Sometimes you find that some people are mentally disturbed, some people are mentally sound. What is it which basically is the construct? There is a certain issue which how they are being treated by the universal elements. Now, one finds it easy to overcome, the other finds it very difficult to even live a normal life. Yeah? The point being, Krishna says these universal elements enter into the cosmos, and at the same time, they do not enter into the cosmos, which essentially means that they enter into the cosmos for one who is completely materially situated, who identifies. It essentially also means that they cannot influence one who is not in the material realm and who is attempting and who is practically elevating himself by coming in touch with Krishna. That is why he sees that. Krishna is also adding about himself so that we could understand this more. As a Paramatma, he is in every body. He is not affected by the universal elements of that body. You can find him in the body of a hog. You can find him in the body of a Brahmana. You can find him in the body of an animal. You can find him in the body of, a deva. The point which you're trying to make is that different kinds of bodies, Krishna occupies and guides them, gives them intelligence, and they don't get affected by, it's basically a situation where he can be in it and he cannot be basically affected by this. Paramatma, he is the Paramatma. He is there in everybody's body, but he is not affected by it. Like just as much as the sun comes in touch with everything which is even abominable, but is not affected by that which it touches. So he's giving the same example that the universal elements enter into the cosmos. They sometimes enter, but then at the same time, they not enter. If we have the capacity to overcome the influence of the universal elements, then we have the ability to be beyond their influence. If you have the ability to be not affected by the body, you're practically being, you're practically experiencing what it is to be transcendental. You're practically experiencing what it is which Krishna is talking about in this verse. So he's saying basically that, yes, there is a universal element, which is my external energy. It is I who is the supreme source of both. Then there is the Tatastha, the Jiva. The Jiva himself has an opportunity to either be overwhelmed or not be overwhelmed. So now in this particular verse, he is talking about the nature of the Jiva and the nature of his potency, and how the Jiva also can be overwhelmed and cannot be overwhelmed in both circumstances. Just as much as the Paramatma is never overwhelmed by where he is. Now, this is the last verse. Etavad eva jigyasam tattva jigyasa sunatmanah anvaya vyatirekebhyam yat sarvatra sarvada etavad. Up to this, what does it mean? He says, a person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. What does this mean? He says that if you ever talk about any kind of spiritual process, if your spiritual process does not account for all of what has been discussed so far, it does not account for the connection to an eternal being, Sat. It does not account for an understanding of what is Sat and Asat, which is the nature of activity after knowing the Supreme. And it does not account for the nature of the Jiva, who has the capacity to either be in the spiritual or in the material realm. If it does not, all the ingredients don't come together, then together for you to move forward. A bona fide religious practice, a bona fide spiritual system needs to be all encompassing and must include all of this. So these 4 verses are the gist of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is basically the gist of the billion verses of the Puranas. It is the gist of all the Vedas put together. And that is why it is so special. It is practically saying there is Sat, there is what is basically knowledge in terms of what is Sat and what is Asat, which is the Chit Vaibhava. And then there is the whole concept of not being influenced by nations. So the Sambandha Gyan that is being stressed here first talks about the qualities of Narayana, talks about the nature of, the Lord himself, what is spiritual versus non-spiritual, talks about the spiritual potency, then talks about the influence of the material energy and how the jiva can overcome the material energy, and says finally that if all of this is not included, then you don't have a proper spiritual system. Yeah, bona fide religion should include all of these. This is a perfect way to see if there is a bona fide system that is being followed. If you have all of these ingredients, then there is a bona fide system. Okay, so this is basically the Chatushloki. Again, I just wanted to give you a little gist from the previous session. But what I wanted to stress was the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam. I wanted you to also understand that this window of opportunity that has been given to us in this lifetime is so rare that you can practically give up everything else just to focus on this activity. Why do I say this? I'm not discouraging people from following their duties at home. I'm not discouraging people away from the families. Oftentimes, devotees relate to their success and failure based on what they've accomplished materially versus what they haven't accomplished materially. It's always a matter of, I haven't accomplished this and I haven't accomplished that. What I'm trying to say is, even if you spend an entire lifetime where everything around you goes to dust and you somehow stick to this process of coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam and Harinam and Sadhu Sangha and Seva, your life, our life would be successful because you are plugging into the essential aspect of what Sriman Narayana himself is saying is the essence. You're practically plugging into a lifetime which is practically connected to the eternal life, eternal cycle. This is very important. You need to assess how you need to contribute your time. The more and more we invest our time in improving upon coming closer and closer in our sambandha, which essentially is to come in touch with those who have basically been very serious practitioners, coming in touch with those who are basically those who are very serious practitioners, but at the same time having an opportunity to serve them in some way, because it's very important. Through service, pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, one realizes, this very essential truth. It is coming through the process of, I would say, disciplic succession, and there's a certain activity that is required for one to proceed further. Then one basically has the ability to come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, which is non-different from Krishna. Imagine Krishna himself giving you a view of the spiritual and the material creation. And he is talking about everything that's in between. This is the Srimad Bhagavatam, the sublime. And he practically felt that this was basically his best offering that he could offer. I'm referring to Srila Vyasadeva because he's non-different from Krishna. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, finally, we talk about understanding that if you have all of this, even if you are in the material cosmos and it is overwhelming you, you have the ability to be transcendental, you have the ability to reach higher and go further. And every one of us, factually, even within a year, we have some realization of what it is to be transcendental by coming in touch with the process of Krishna consciousness. It's quite profound. You see, the point I'm trying to make is no one offered a very practical system before Srila Prabhupada. No, I'm saying this because different sampradayas exist and they've all had their offerings. But coming in touch with them and being able to take what they've offered into the context of someone who goes to work on a daily basis, be in the West or elsewhere, and being able to implement it in day-to-day life and also experience what has been written, this is a gift which is incomparable. What I'm trying to say is that this is worth a complete lifetime's dedication. Regardless of what needs to be accomplished and not accomplished, if this is accomplished, then lifetime has been accomplished. We have done something substantial with our time because our time in reality belongs to Krishna. If we have used it, at least we have struggled to kind of use it in Krishna's service, our lifetime is successful. Don't worry about outcomes because effort is within our realm and we need to put in the efforts that are basically expected of us. We should never worry so much about outcomes, even though desiring a positive outcome is perfectly fine. Yeah, but don't worry about what's going to be given after. The point is, keep doing what is right. I say this because some of us expect to feel happy after coming into a spiritual process. Happiness and peacefulness is not the goal of Krishna consciousness. Happiness and peacefulness is the goal of those who are attaining the mode of goodness, which is far below what's being offered by Srimad Bhagavatam. The mode of goodness is a platform. You will feel happy. You will feel peaceful. These are definitely prerequisites because you don't get disturbed. But please don't think that's the goal. Peace is not the goal of Krishna consciousness. We are not looking for peace here. We are being given something far bigger. So even if life becomes a little bit tough, trying to attain something far bigger and objective, it's worth putting in the effort. And I'm saying this because we don't want to set low bars and low level goals of wanting peace, etc. That's basically what the mode of goodness can offer us. We are wanting to go beyond and use the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness is a platform. So we want to ultimately come to the mode of goodness so that we don't get hazard. How do we come to the mode of goodness? We come to the mode of goodness by again and again coming in touch with Krishna. We don't have an alternative process in our system. Please understand it. We don't have an alternative in our system to either come to the mode of goodness or to even solve problems of the lower modes. We depend completely on the process itself. So we chant Harinam, we worship our deities, we do sadhu sangha, we come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. All of this allows us to come to the mode of goodness and then go beyond and establish a relationship and practically go and completely be immersed in the eternal journey. So it's quite fascinating that we have been given an extraordinarily, I would say, powerful system which has practically thought of everything. You don't need to really do any special thinking. We just need to understand that our goals have to be eternal, which is why these are so important because they are practically capturing the foundation of Sambandha. You need to first understand that you need to plug into something which is eternal. That's the first point. And then you need to understand that there is something, there are activities that can be either eternal and there can be activities that are temporal, which are temporary by nature. There's also the concept of being able to overcome the influence of that which can never be overcome because Krishna's Maya, one can never overcome Krishna's Maya because Krishna's Maya itself is so powerful. One can never overcome Krishna's Maya that easily. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to understand that these 4 verses themselves are giving us a window into the sublime offering of Srila Vyasadeva, who had a view of the spiritual and the material sky, which was incomparable because he was Krishna himself. You can never compare what Srila Vyasadeva has written with the realization of others because Srila Vyasadeva was Krishna himself. So he basically had a view which was just fascinating to see and fascinating to read. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to take some questions and then we can go further. Please don't put questions on chat. I'm using my phone and I'm not sure as to how to get to chat using my phone. Perhaps there's a way, but I'm just wanting to basically say that please unmute yourself and ask questions. I'll be happy to answer them.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for a very
Haribol.
nice class. You mentioned about Panchanga and you mentioned about astrology, the birth time. Generally, from a Karma Kanda perspective, we look at the constellations and how relevant it is after being a devotee. Do we have to align ourselves, or we are completely surrendered to Krishna that he would maneuver our life in such a way that we follow the constellations anyway?
Well, basically, we have to, as practicing devotees, we always have to look for precept. That's a fundamental step. Precept essentially means we need to look and see how our predecessors lived their life. And by looking at how the predecessors lived their life, we would have an idea as to how to manage our life going forward. First and foremost, do we need to look into constellations, etc., to attain the goal of Krishna consciousness? The answer is no.
Yeah.
First and foremost, yeah, we should be very clear that we can chant, we can serve the deities, we can read Srimad Bhagavatam, we can associate with devotees, and we can serve. This is all that is required. So there's no need to understand, the particular aspects of karma. There's no necessity, so to speak. That is the first point. We want to be very clear that there is no necessity. However, the second point, which is also being arrived at, is that the Vedic knowledge and how people operated in the past was, you read about it, for example, that Srila Jiva Goswami, for instance, he looked at an auspicious time for sending Srinivas Acharya and Narottam Das Thakur with all our scripture from Vrindavan to Bengal. Okay? So you read about that as well. So the point is, they used it from a practical perspective because if you have information, it is just intelligent for you to plan according to that piece of information as well. So you do all of that and you yet surrender. So the point I'm trying to make is that if someone is getting married, it's good to look for an auspicious time to get married. It is good to look for compatibility because all of this is perception. All of this is information. Once this information is gathered, then we have the ability to plan accordingly, and then we move forward. And after all, ultimately, we leave all the results to Krishna. So I just want to say that there's a practical side to it that we can't really dismiss because it's giving a vision. It's simply, for example, finding out if the weather is going to be bad. If the weather is going to be bad, you carry an umbrella. Yeah. Now, one can say that I'm not even going to look into it. If it rains, I'm going to get drenched. If it's not going to rain, I'm going to have a sunny experience. I'm just going to step out, which is fine. Yeah, which is fine. What I'm trying to say is we shouldn't mix up Krishna consciousness with astrology or the muhurta, because Krishna consciousness does not require any of this. Krishna consciousness requires us to be able to tolerate our circumstances, and it requires that we accept whatever is being given to us as being arranged by Krishna, and we practically move forward, keeping only his service as the goal. However, if some of us exist with goals of wanting to get married, wanting to basically have, decision making, wanting to basically do things in this world, then it is good to gain some perspective as to whether such activity can help or not help in our process as we move forward. Does it make sense? It's actually basically more of a practical usage rather than necessity from the perspective of Krishna consciousness.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Very clear.
Sure.
While others are thinking of their question, just an extension. When you're born with a certain karma. So you come with a certain karma of having to go through something. Does becoming a devotee and practicing Krishna consciousness alter your karma? Like you're born with a certain chart of going through.
Yes. No, I get your question. Yeah. See, the fact is, yes, our karma can change quite dynamically. If our karma can never change from the time you're born, there's no point in taking up sadhana bhakti. Does it make sense? We are who we are. We are conditioned by what we were born with. then what is it that you're attempting to change, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. So the point is, yes, karma changes. Who we were when we were at the time of birth changes as life progresses. Who we are today could be a reflection of many things. There could be positive changes because we could have engaged in service. There could be changes in karma because we have been initiated, because the guru has come into our life and then has practically given us an opportunity to move forward in Krishna consciousness. All of that can change karma. Daily activity of Krishna consciousness can displace karma, unrestrictedly. So all of this can change. So the point is, karma can change. The birth chart changes. The birth chart that we are born with is always, if someone knows what to do, they would always take a look at karma at the time of birth. They would also take a look at karma in the present, and they would make an assessment to see what is still causing problems so that they could deal with it. But this is basically to answer your question, that karma does change.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. That's very
Sure.
consoling.
Yeah, it is. True.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
Haribol, Prabhu. Sharda here. Prabhu, I'm still not quite clear about the second verse you clarified, the Chatushloki. Could you give some more elaboration on that, please?
Which verse are you referring to?
Second verse of the Chatushloki.
The second verse.
Yeah, I'm not quite clear in my mind, you said.
One moment. I'm just going back to that. Just give me a moment. Do you have the verse in front of you?
No, I don't. No, I have put a database on, but I just want your explanation so I can understand a bit more.
Okay, let's try. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is because then you could also read it and I would be able to explain it. So
Okay.
this is verse 33, yeah,
Okay.
of the ninth chapter, second canto. This is the second verse. One moment. Sorry, 34, verse 34, sorry. So are you referring to, O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it's without relation to me, has no reality? Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. Is that what you're referring to?
No, you said the universe says and there's 5
Right,
elements.
right. Okay, I get it. Okay, that's not this one. There's the next one. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, Brahma, please. No, it's okay. Don't worry. Oh, Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly,
Yeah,
I myself also exist within everything created, and at the same time, I'm outside of everything. First, understand this through the super soul. The Paramatma exists in everyone's body, but the Paramatma is not affected by what goes on in that body. He is not affected. Okay? Now extend this experience to a soul. Extend this experience to a soul who is also in a body, but the soul has attained the same level of quality of consciousness as the Paramatma. So he is able to remain in the body without being affected by the activities of the body. Can you extend it now in terms of understanding? Yeah. Is that clear? No.
Because we are the part of the soul.
Yes, we are a part of the Paramatma, but our consciousness, if it becomes qualitatively the same, if we are elevated enough to be Krishna conscious and we don't identify with the body, then we can exist in this body just as much as the Paramatma would. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that is exactly what is being spoken of in this verse. He says, universal elements enter into the cosmos. When he says the universe entering into the cosmos, he is referring to the souls in this particular universe being covered over by the universal elements. Everything is the universal elements. Our body is the 5 different elements. It is the universal elements. It's a distortion which is being presented. If in this body, the soul attains the same quality as the super soul, the Paramatma, then just as much as the Paramatma doesn't get affected, the soul will also not get affected. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what is being conveyed here. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does affect us? The material energy of the Lord or our ego?
Basically, what we are is that we are in this body. Ego is simply identifying with this body. False ego is simply an identification with this body. Okay?
Yeah.
When we identify with the qualitative oneness with the Lord, we are not affected. It is not a theoretical understanding. It is not a theoretical understanding. This is something that is to be attained through experience. So that's why in the process of Krishna consciousness, when we chant, when we come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, when we worship the deities, when we basically serve the deities, we come to Vrindavan, we go to Mayapur, all of these places, then we have the ability to basically go through experiences that remind us that we are not this body, and have the ability to remind us that we are basically Krishna's servants and we are a part and parcel of his existence. So when these experiences happen, our false ego gets demolished, demands and desires get demolished, and we start aspiring for wanting to serve him according to his desires. So that is the whole prospect of sadhana bhakti. Yeah. So that is what we are trying to do here. So this is the explanation that the Lord is giving, saying that just as much as I exist in the body and I don't get affected, you can also exist in such a body and not be affected. That is what he's trying to say here.
Yeah. So my question is then, what does affect us? Why we are going away from Krishna? What does that? Material energy is doing it or what?
Yeah, we are basically being overwhelmed by material energy because we are tatastha. We are too small. As a consequence, we are overwhelmed. Krishna is saying, I'm not overwhelmed, but you are overwhelmed because you're very small. Now, when you start coming in touch with me regularly, then you will also be able to shake this off. That is what he's saying.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Not at all. Not at all. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol.
Thank you for wonderfully explaining. Just wanted to ask, are we not desiring enough? Just like an extension of that question. Are we not desiring enough that we want to be? Is that the reason that most of the time we are overwhelmed because our desires are not really okay?
Which essentially, well, we can always say that desiring is very important, absolutely. But it essentially means that the extent to which we need to come in touch with profound Krishna consciousness is not happening to the extent to which we need to come in touch with it. Do you understand? So for example, some of us are in a journey and we are coming out of a fever. When we come out of a fever, we would still feel quite miserable. So we shouldn't really take the condition of feeling miserable as a symptom of not coming in touch with what is going to cure us. So some of us, we come in touch with something very powerful. It starts the process of curing us of our fever, but we still show symptoms of the fever. And sometimes it makes it seem as if no changes happen in life. Okay. But in reality, changes are happening. So we shouldn't judge ourselves based on our experiences. Instead, what we should do is we should judge and see what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. Am I chanting at the given particular time? Am I reading? Am I coming in touch with Seva? Am I coming in touch with the deities? If I do more and more of all of these, then I have the ability to basically understand that we can move forward. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is don't go with whether you feel happy about what you're doing. Go with what the acharyas are telling you to do. It is just a matter of time before you're able to shake this off. It's just a matter of time. So feel encouraged that you are. The idea is to always see. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to, even sometimes you're in really anxiety, oh, I couldn't do this. I really want to do it. Oh, and you're in anxiety. You think that is okay? Because sometimes you feel, oh my God, that anxiety, that you want to do something, that anxiety overwhelms you. So is that
when you say want to do something, you're talking about doing something for Krishna.
Something for of course spiritual, like reading. Oh, I couldn't do it. I really want to do more. So these things also sometimes overwhelms you. So
which is fine. You see, if you're going to be anxious, you see, there's something. If you want to penetrate material energy, there has to be some level of, I would say, intensity. Without intensity, you cannot penetrate material coverings. You can't penetrate anything material. So as a consequence, what I'm saying is, feeling agitated about not being able to do what you want to do is perfectly fine, because you're at least absorbing yourself and wanting to make things happen. And it will happen. You're basically fighting against material energy and saying, yes, I want to accomplish all of this, but then here's my circumstance where I'm not able to do this, I'm able to do this, etc. Which requires, what I'm trying to say is that you should always go back to the basics. Okay? You should go back to the basics and say that working on my chanting, I'm going to do nothing else. I'm going to ensure that my chanting gets 2 full hours every day. You know, whatever time it takes for you to chant. You have to go back to the basics. Once you go back to the basics, you then add other things as the basics become more founded. And when I use the word basics, I'm not referring to the fact that someone is starting out in Krishna consciousness. I'm referring out to the fact that, you know, we have very foundational activities, which is chanting. Go back and then just fix the chanting part, because from that, everything else will fall in place. Because if that is not going to be founded properly, there's going to be constant trouble. So I'm suggesting do that. That is the first point. Second, do not worry about constantly not having time. It's a good thing. Okay? It's a good thing to be busy and constantly not having time, where you constantly force things out of your life and you're constantly reprioritizing and bringing things into your life that matter. So please don't worry about being busy, because it's a good thing. Yeah, we don't really, all of us need to be busy. It's very important for us to be busy. The third point, which is very important, is, okay, add back in the order of sadhu sangha. And this is basically those who can inspire us. So you hear Vani and then get inspired. Go into Namasmaran, Namakirtan, come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam at whatever level you can. And what I'm saying is this applies to everyone, even if they have spent 20, 30 years in this. This applies to everyone. If you want to come back and redo the foundation, nice steps. And one thing, I want to tell this to everyone, because it's just a humble offering. The day we realize that the most basic activities of Krishna consciousness are in fact the most powerful is the day when we have really understood Krishna consciousness. Most devotees are always looking for complicated ways to improve their spiritual life. In reality, the biggest and the best realization is when you realize that what's been given to you, which is very simple to do, is in reality so powerful that that's all you need. That's why you should always remember and go back to our predecessors. Go back to the Goswamis of Vrindavan. They used to be sitting under trees and chanting Harinam. They used to worship their deities in very, very simple ways because they didn't have the means to do so beyond that. This is how they used to do it. Go back to Gaura Kishodhar Babaji Maharaj. He was illiterate. He practically used to chant on a string of cloth that he used to string together. He used to wear clothes that were discarded by others. The point I'm trying to make is our acharyas have shown us that what is considered to be very basic in our mind, in reality, is the most profound of activities. To realize that that is actually more profound and it is very powerful is the best realization one could have in Krishna consciousness. It takes time to get that realization. It takes time for people to realize that what's been given to them is actually the most powerful process ever. We don't need complicated means to reach Krishna. What's been given to us is exactly what is required. I hope this makes sense.
Oh, thank you very much, Prabhu. That really liberated everything. Okay, covered everything. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, you mentioned simple. It's simple, but it's the ego that's the problem. The ego complicates everything.
Yes, that's a fact. Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he mentioned this once in the manner. Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, my god brother, he was just mentioning this to me personally when we were having a conversation. He was saying, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying, our process of Krishna consciousness is very simple. He said, the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple. Devotees are complicated. Devotees have such complicated lives that the process of Krishna consciousness itself becomes very complicated. So this is, it's actually so true. Our lifestyles are so complicated that even the most simplest of process appears to be very difficult. No, but there's also this class of devotees who believe that something needs to be complicated for it to work. I'm just wanting to say there's something we have to understand is that as days progress by and we are able to hold on to the bead bag and we feel great comfort in just holding on to the beads given by the spiritual master, understanding that all solutions are in that bead bag is the day when we would have really, really made real advancement. I'm just sharing this as a basic motivation that this is how we should look at it. it's a reality. The day we are able to see that what's been given to us by the spiritual master in that bead bag has the ability to solve everything, and it has the ability to take us beyond to the spiritual sky, is the day when we have realized that what has been given to us is the greatest gift, and we wouldn't really be looking for more complicated means. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Hema Gopika Dasi.
Haribo?
So, Veda Vyasa is different from Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasadeva?
The same personality. Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasadeva is Veda Vyasa because Vyasa is a position. And Vyasa position, Vyasa means to divide. And basically to recompile and look at the consciousness of the individuals in the universe, and to say that this is the extent of consciousness, these are the layers of consciousness. To manage this layer of consciousness, there needs to be a body of knowledge, and there has to be a certain ease based on the level of intelligence that is found in the planet. As a consequence, you represent all the scripture oriented to what is basically going to be needed for this particular group of people in the population, in the body of population, for them to be able to move forward. This is very specific to the middle planet, which is our planet, yeah? The earthly system. So Srila Vyasadeva means, Vyasa means to divide. He divides the original Yajurveda into 4 parts. Before dividing, he extracts the Puranas, the Itihasas, and the Kavyas. And then he basically aligns and gives us a gist of the Puranas that is applicable and that can be digested based on the intelligence of the present day population. And this is basically what it means. So it is the same personality.
Okay, then, I mean, as per the material calculations, so he appeared at the junction of Dwapara and Kali. Is that true, Prabhu?
He appears in every Dwapara, actually.
I see. I see.
He appears in every Yuga. He appears in
Okay.
every Yuga, but particularly the present Vyasa has appeared in Dwapara. During
Okay.
Parishad Maharaj's time, during the Pandavas' time, he appeared during that time.
Then how about this Vedas compilation, division and all? So it is carried over from earlier days? How should I
Yes.
understand this?
So you are trying to basically say that how could this have been the beginning? That's what you're asking me. If it was 5,000 years back, is that your question?
Yes, Prabhu, and the appearance of Srimad Bhagavatam as well.
No, but this is basically what I'm trying to say is that there are, even in our Bhagavatam, you will find, I'm not sure as to which verse it is, or etc. But there are different versions of the Bhagavatam in different universes based on the experiences of and the maturity of the Atma. You know, different verses. That the substance and the essence would be the same, but there would be different topics being discussed in certain, different, I would say, different types of, I would say illustrations in terms of the experiences and the leelas, etc., would be highlighted. The point being that what we have today is a combination, or rather a presentation that has come from 5,000 years back, that was spoken by Srila Vyasa. He basically passed it on to Srila Sukadev Goswami, and Srila Sukadev Goswami passed it on to us. Now, the point being that the same Srila Vyasadeva is also the original compiler. He is the original personality of Godhead who also divided the Vedas and recompiled them and represented them. When he comes in this particular Kali Yuga, he looks at the particular Yuga and says that of all the Puranas, this Yuga can only handle this much. So he will take, say, 400,000 verses, which is what Srila Jiva Goswami is talking about. He will take 400,000 verses and then he would compile them. So all of this, of what we are talking about, was done for this particular Yuga cycle. It was not done before. It was done for this Yuga cycle, but it gets done in as many Yuga cycles as required in the same day of Lord Brahma. Does it make sense?
So Prabhu, I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry. You're a technology person, so you're basically trying to find out steps, and so that's okay. Go ahead.
So for this particular Yuga, so he has given us this version of Srimad Bhagavatam that we have now.
Yes, we should understand that this has different verses from different Srimad Bhagavatams as well. There are certain aspects of this. There are commentaries which say that there are certain aspects of this which belong to different universes, different systems. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is what was given to us 5,000 years back by Srila Vyasadeva. That should be our understanding. 5,000 years back, he ran through a compilation, okay, of the original Veda and said that, okay, the original Veda in all its glory can't be presented. It can only be presented in the present form. So he breaks it into 4 parts. He extracts all the Puranas and the Kavyas. He does not give the entire billion verses. He gives a 400,000 verse, which is a condensed version of the Puranas into this particular universe, into this particular planet. All of this is a part of the 5,000-year experience that we have.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so
Not
much.
at all. Not at all.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dhanyavad Pranam, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, you were explaining that we are not performing devotional service to have a very peaceful and happy kind of experience, but the goal is to attain pure devotional service. So when a practicing or aspiring devotee like myself, and is it if I'm experiencing some problem, is it because I'm not performing proper devotional service? Is that the reason why the difficulties are cropping up, Prabhuji?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Difficulties experienced by the devotee, especially those who are serious in practicing Krishna consciousness, we should always examine our life to see if the difficulties that come to us are in reality helping us chant better. Are they helping us surrender more? Are they helping us give up certain attachments? Then we should understand that these difficulties themselves are being managed by Krishna's servants. This is not necessarily bad karma. This is basically to be accepted as the Lord's arrangement. Regardless, even if it were to be bad karma, we still accept it as the Lord's arrangement to bring us closer to Him. We accept everything as being the Lord's arrangement to bring us closer to Him. That is the right attitude. This is Trinadapi Sunichena. Trinadapi Sunichena is to accept life as if it has been arranged by the Lord. Look today at 6 o'clock in the morning or whenever we wake up, look out into the sky and have an understanding that this day, whatever comes to me is being arranged by Krishna Himself, because I have certain subtle attachments that I can't perceive. He's working on me for me to be able to look at them and give them up so that I could be a better servant. So that is what you should do. You should look and see if your devotional service is improved. You should look and see if your attitude of surrender is improved. You should look and see if your overall judgment of the material world and overall attachment to people surrounding you, etc., has actually been given a new, fresh perspective so that you can focus more on what is more real internally. While externally, you will live in the world as if you're expected to performing your dharma. Does it make sense? You will tolerate the circumstances, accepting reality of life. Internally, you will understand that this is Krishna's mercy. Externally, you will respond to it as required according to dharma. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Very nice answer, Prabhu. It's really just beautiful.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, with that answer, I just wanted to ask, okay, you're tolerating these circumstances and you can really see, yes, this is Krishna's mercy, because the more problem comes, then you go for more shelter. But still, if there is a possibility, is it okay to get out of that situation?
You should always try to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, see, the point is that we are not here to suffer. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, because the soul is a pleasure seeker by nature. The soul is a pleasure seeker by nature. So we don't want to contradict the nature of the soul and say that glorification of suffering is not what we are supposed to do. That is not what I was referring to. So there should be every attempt made to make improvements. Yes. But from a practical perspective, without losing perspective that Krishna is in charge, He is doing something to bring me closer. Externally, we should take steps that are more practical so that we can fit into what we're doing dharmically. The dharma should always be done. And one thing, dharma is always difficult to do. Please understand. But if you take up dharma and you engage in dharma very carefully, then there will be an opportunity for us to develop deep realizations. These deep realizations would allow us to develop greater level of detachment. And because detachment comes from knowledge, you see? And as a consequence, we are able to proceed further in life. So it's a cycle. So we don't want to suffer. We want to basically understand that, yes, there can be certain practical steps that can be taken. You know, I used to wonder, for example, when my spiritual master was diagnosed with melanoma, he was an extraordinarily powerful person, very powerful. You know, those who have had the opportunity to have come in touch with him would attest to the fact that he could have practically managed his entire disease very easily, taken the karma, dissolved it. He was an extraordinarily powerful person. But what he wanted to do was wanted to set an example that this can happen to someone who is very serious in Krishna consciousness. So he developed melanoma, his foot was amputated, and then he basically used to strive very hard with all kinds of cancer, trying to basically inspire souls as they move forward. This is to give a message to devotees that don't think that Krishna consciousness means that you're going to experience nothing. It simply means that regardless of how complex life could be, you would still feel extraordinarily loved and cared for by the Lord, because you will be in a different level of connection with the Lord himself. Krishna consciousness essentially means that we are able to process life very effectively. We are able to process. Yeah? Does it make sense? We have to understand that we need to. Yeah. So, pardon me?
I think.
Yeah. So, okay. So there was some disturbance, I guess. Could everyone kind of make an attempt to go on mute, please? But I'm trying to see if I can put you on mute. So the consciousness is all about being able to understand this. So I was just wanting to say that we don't want to think that we should do nothing. We are not meant to be inert. We are meant to examine things. We are first meant to accept the reality that this is Krishna. One should never think that something is happening to us without Krishna's involvement. We should always think that, yes, Krishna is involved. Especially if you're dealing with a devotee, understand that Krishna is involved. Krishna is somehow wanting us to process this because this is unfinished business. Maybe there are subtle attachments that we can't really understand from these experiences. We need to process all of this so that we could advance ourselves. So we accept it as Krishna's arrangement for our own benefit. We accept it as his arrangement. However, Krishna also expects us to act according to the reality of life. So we look and examine and see that this is my circumstance. So suppose I have a disease, what should I do to cure myself of the disease? So take practical steps. That is what you're supposed to do to cure yourself of a disease. So these are external steps, and we should never forget that external steps should be taken, but with an internal posture that we are surrendered. Even if you take external steps, things will not get resolved. You need to accept it. This is basically what the internal conversation should be. The internal conversation is where you accept things and tolerate the circumstance. Trinadapi Sunichena is the internal dialogue. Externally, you do what is practical, which is very important. So we do not want to assume that, yes, I'm injured. Yes, I can cross the road without looking left or right. I can walk in front of a truck and then the truck wouldn't do anything to me. We don't want to assume any of that. Yeah, we want to be practical about life, but internally we keep accepting life as Trinadapi Sunichena, and we constantly understand that whatever we need to move forward has already been given today. We do not want to think that there's got to be a second coming of a guru, there has to be a second coming of Srila Prabhupada. We don't want to think that there's got a second coming of the acharyas so that we could be pushed out. We already should assume that everything has been given. It is a fact, everything has been given. Yeah. So we need to move forward. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And also, I just wanted to ask, because yesterday I was there was in another class, your god sister Chitti Sakti Mataji was saying, if this is happening and you can really think it's Krishna is giving you that service, take it, take the service. So because that's a bit of confidential, so I just don't want to say here. And take up the service, she said. What do you want to just make a general? I don't know whether you can make a general statement.
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure as to what the background is.
Yeah, but
I would love to, but that is I don't know the background. So yeah,
maybe because it is involved. I do not want to speak here.
That's perfectly fine.
So maybe I would send you a message then, Prabhu.
Sure, you could. Yeah, you could definitely.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for so wonderful points in lecture.
Yes.
So Prabhuji, Prabhuji, my question is regarding the second sloka, Chaturmukhi, O Brahma, whatever appeared to be any value if it is without relationship to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness.
Yes.
So Prabhuji, actually we try to relate our activities, whatever activities we have day to day with Krishna. For example, cleaning the house. Oh Krishna, see your house, we are cleaning, we're cooking, we are thinking of Krishna. And we are doing our duties, because occupational duties, because Krishna placed us in specific varna and ashrama. So thinking all, but we have to relate everything to Krishna, like our eating, our exercising. When we exercise our body, we're taking care of our body, right? So, so Prabhuji, we think in relationship to Krishna. Otherwise we'll be tangled in the illusory energy. So, Prabhuji, when we are doing such activities, like we are not alone in the house, that we are not sadhus, that no one is disturbing us. We have kids, and Prabhuji, sometimes kids want us to watch movie, they want to go beach, and people go to, vacation trips like Disneyland or some wherever, right? So how to, how can we see that situation? How can we Krishnaize those moments?
Good.
And yeah.
Okay, see, those moments where you literally see no connection is exactly what Krishna is talking about here. So there's no need to try and fit in everything into Krishna. Does it make sense? In a day of 24 hours, in a lifespan of X number of years, in a year, we need to know that, yes, we could possibly be engaging in activity that has no relationship to Krishna. So we shouldn't really make an extraordinary attempt to try and fit that particular activity somehow or the other to Krishna. Because if it is presenting itself very clearly that it has no relationship, then it has no relationship. Does it make sense? Yeah? We should just be realistic and say, okay, this has no relationship with Krishna, but it is my present circumstance. I am surrounded by people who are not so interested. So I may just need to cooperate with their consciousness. Let me go along so that they would at least have, prasadam, for instance, or let me go along so that basically, there's harmony in the house and there's no disturbance. So we don't want to take something which is not related and somehow struggle to relate to it. Does it make sense? It is better to look at black as black and white as white. We don't need to confuse ourselves. Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yes,
yeah.
Prabhuji.
This is reality. So please accept the reality, because that reality, if we try to kind of say, some devotees get into the habit of saying, yes, I'm doing this and I'm doing this for Krishna. Don't do it. Look at it very clearly and see if it is related, it is related. If it is not related, then you need to kind of think about it deep and hard, and also understand that, yes, I'm involved in this. It is not related, but maybe I don't have a choice because, I'm surrounded by people. I need to maintain some harmony. I do not want to disturb the situation, in the circumstance of the family to such an extent where they become averse to. Start thinking like a preacher. Maintain very strict conservative standards for yourself. Be liberal with the outside world. That's what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji, to some extent.
No, okay. No, I'm just saying there's a reality associated with this world. You can't solve it. You cannot solve it. You need to understand that this is real. This is an issue. What do I do? Then you need to understand that, okay, you need to adapt. Look at the fact that Srila Vyasadeva, when he appeared as a Supreme Personality, he presented 18 different Puranas to adjust to different levels of consciousness. He was not in an illusion that everybody is going to do the same thing. So why should we be in illusion? We should just look and say, yes, this is reality. The consciousness does not seem to really plug in. I can offer prayers to Srila Prabhupada. I will ensure that there's enough prasadam. I will be very conservative with the way I'm doing things, but I will look at him or her, if these are little children or even personal, I would say spouses, I will look at them and say, okay, they seem to be needing more time. So let me be more accommodative and let me do my duty. because they would then appreciate and still be aligned with Srila Prabhupada. Does it make sense? There's a little bit of thinking that has to happen here, where we don't need to kind of somehow or the other imagine that it is connected. If it is not connected, it is not connected.
Fine, Prabhuji. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
A very practical question. Thank you, Mataji, for raising this. And thank you, Prabhu, for addressing this.
Sure.
I remember from early starting Krishna consciousness, my parents are not, family is not Krishna consciousness. And I used to go them and I used to say, everything is karmi, no, no, no. And that used to make them so upset and irritated. And they were anti-Krishna consciousness because I was saying that what. And then now I get up very early in the morning before everybody else and I chant and I do whatever. And I still follow the regulations very strictly. But I'm, as I said, very liberal with them. And they see that quality that you're having, either you're more positive or more calm or whatever that they see, they get attracted to that. Now, years down, they are asking me questions on Krishna consciousness. They're getting more favorable. So it does help in the long run. You don't see the benefit immediately, but it does rub off them. And it becomes subtle preaching. They don't want to accept it, but it becomes subtle preaching.
Yeah, it is better. It's like offering a plate of prasadam or inviting people to kirtan. Yeah. They could be meat eaters and they could be, not into anything, but then they will benefit. So why kind of impose the same rules? Because that is not very clever in terms of preaching either. Because you notice the greatest of Vaishnavas is Lord Shiva, and he is the greatest of preachers. And he basically adapts to different people according to their needs. You can sometimes find him in the crematoriums, connecting souls who are in the darkness to Krishna in certain ways through him. You can sometimes find him seated with the Vaishnavas talking about the glories of Krishna. You basically one who is internally extraordinarily powerfully well situated, but is completely non-envious of the world. And as a consequence, he is able to lend himself and connect everybody to Krishna. That's why he is the greatest of all Vaishnavas. So we need to basically meditate on him as a personality who is basically our leader. He's the greatest of all Vaishnavas. Why is he called Param Vaishnav? Because he's completely non-envious. He's all accepting. That's why he's called Param Vaishnav. Yes. Any other question or comment?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So actually I was reading Chaturmukhi Shloka 4. It's written here.
Chatushloki.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chatushloki Shloka. Okay. 4.
Mm-hmm. 4.
A person who is searching after supreme absolute truth, the personality of God, had most certainly searched for it up to this in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly or indirectly. So I'm just relating it to second verse that I was, saying that where, yes, there is situations that we are watching movie, we cannot, this totally Maya, we cannot relate Krishna consciousness. But Prabhuji, sometimes that we are making just, we are trying to be with the environment, okay, just to maintain peace or satisfy other souls around us. We are watching, and sometimes definitely for gratifying our own senses too. Not always for others. I'm not that big devotee that we also, enjoy Maya. So sometimes for this sloka, it is written that, but you told there is acceptance and rejectance continuously in our mind. Sometimes we read or hear something and our mind is for some moments, into Krishna consciousness. Although we are watching movie, although we are on beach, although, we are in Disneyland. So a person who is searching after the supreme truth, there also he's mostly continuously searching Krishna in all circumstances, wherever he is.
No, I think No. What you should understand about this verse is that they're defining that if you don't have the previous ingredients, then you don't have what would call an kind of very wholesome understanding of sambandha. That is what is being conveyed in this verse. Yeah. So he is referring to a much broader approach of spiritual practice, where one should know Krishna, one should know what is Krishna consciousness and what is not Krishna consciousness. One should know that you can exist in Krishna's Maya without being affected by it. And here, this verse talks about the fact that all of the above is required for one to constitute a spiritual practice. So this is basically how you define bona fide religious spiritual practice. That's what is being conveyed here. Yeah. So when they say a person who is searching, they're trying to assist the person who is searching, saying, understand all of the above. Then you will be able to kind of have a good understanding that you are in a path which is quite fixed. Krishna's internal potency, Krishna's external potency, understanding how the marginal potency, the tatastha, who is the jiva, who is going to exist based on the influence of the external and internal potency. All of that is encompassing. That's what is being spoken of here.
So it's much deeper, Prabhuji. Yeah.
I guess, yes, it's been written in the Bhagavatam. I would say it could be deep.
Yes. I think I'm trying to read Bhagavatam along with you, along with, our lectures, but it is once we are reading, it is like just an introduction, and we have to read, I don't know, many times to understand it properly.
True. True. Any other question or comment? They can take a last question. Haribol, yes?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I would like to ask one question.
Yes.
In my view, lately, I think it's after my Guru Maharaj disappearance, I feel that when spirituality is more to look inward, where I see that I'm envious about someone. I'm angry, even if my kids do something, I'm angry. At times I see frustrations. There's so many Madha Matsya, there's so many things that are going inside me. And I'm connected with the literature of this sort, like especially Bhagavatam and chanting. Where is the balance when would I see that? How can I cleanse my inside, Prabhuji? Or just doing chanting would someday cleanse me inside as well? Because I do clearly see inside me that there are so many impurities now these days, especially.
I think this is a very important step for us to be able to peek inside and understand that we are not clean. Because in most cases, we assume that we are clean, you see? So as a consequence, I would say that your sadhana and your being in touch with Krishna consciousness has brought you to a point where you can look inside and say that I'm dirty inside. How do you clean what is dirty inside? You can't really pick each and every piece that is dirty one by one, methodically and throw it out, because it's very cumbersome. Because you will never know, and maybe we have not evolved to such an extent that we can see things that are so subtle which can affect us very badly. We don't know. So we should have a process and faith that that process will work. So to answer your question, wherever you are today is also a gift of the process of chanting. So you should simply continue the process of chanting, seva, and association, and that in turn will remove whatever else is remaining in our heart. When Krishna is looking at you, or when Krishna is looking at any one of us, he is really not looking and nitpicking on 1, 2, 3. Oh, he's saying, oh, look at this guy. Look what he's doing at 11 o'clock in the morning. Look what he's doing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He's really not nitpicking and kind of picking each and every bad aspect of who we are. He takes us as a person. He takes us as a jiva who basically has a desire that positively is Krishna consciousness, but there are certain issues which the jiva is fighting for, and Krishna provides to the strength and the blessings for us to be able to overcome that. So what we must understand is that our process and our understanding should be like Krishna's. Krishna looks at us holistically. You should tend to unless there are certain gross misdemeanors, then you need to pick them and throw them out because they're going to be harmful regardless of where you are in your journey. If there are gross activities that are clearly harmful, throw them out because they're not going to help. But don't go nitpicking into your heart. You're better off doing the process that has actually given you the ability to accept that there are issues. And that's the same process that can also take you forward. So my point to you is it's a very powerful process. Krishna looks at our journey as a whole. He doesn't nitpick. He doesn't say that this guy is disqualified because of this thing. He looks at our life as a whole and say, yes, he is wanting to come to me, but he has a lot of nonsense. So I must help him get rid of the nonsense. So that's how Krishna's mercy is going to flow through. So I'm suggesting just go ahead with what you've been doing so far. It seems to be working.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. I mean, my view was, if I cannot love people around me, how can I love Krishna? There's a hypocrisy that I find inside my heart. Okay,
good. So I guess what I'm saying is, looking at it and then increasing your involvement in Krishna consciousness and exposing yourself to Srimad Bhagavatam and understanding all of that. All of this is a part of the journey. So I'm just wanting to say that you're in the process. So you shouldn't really be too overwhelmed and start nitpicking unless there's an issue which is, gross, which means that, you don't need to really be very spiritually advanced to find out something is not working. You should know that, okay, this is not something that's going to help. Then they kick it out, just kick it out of your, activity. But otherwise, I'm saying you're on track. So that's the point.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other question or comment before we end today's session?
I have one question for Hare Krishna. Sharda here. Hare
Yes,
Bol,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Yes.
you said about just follow the process of chanting and also devoted time for the families and other, so that they don't get upset. They cannot be something with some kind of difficulties in your sadhana. They do not impose. But I also heard that if you have the family attachments, then your chanting doesn't go well and you cannot proceed in your sadhana. So either you have material attachments or spiritual. So how can we draw the line so we can at least follow sadhana strictly, but at the same time give some quality time to the family?
Yes. So basically, the idea is that attachment is never good because it's in the mode of passion.
Yeah.
To act out in duty towards the family, one needn't be attached. One needs to be affectionate. Affection is in the mode of goodness. Attachment is in the mode of passion. Giving up attachment and taking up affection is what would happen if we become serious in sadhana. Does it make sense? So we need to be in the situation of mode of goodness where we are saying, I want to perform my duties because I'm affectionate towards people who are around me. But at the same time, I'm not going to get overwhelmed by the environment. You get overwhelmed by the environment if we are in passion. So elevating our consciousness to goodness would allow us to be affectionate towards family members. But at the same time, we would be able to continue with our Krishna consciousness. So I want to distinguish the word attachment and say, attachment is never such a wonderful thing because it is in the mode of passion. It is going to give us grief at some point or the other. We don't want to operate in that level. We want to elevate ourselves to the mode of goodness. When we come to the mode of goodness, we would still be exerting ourselves and performing duties, but it would be in affection, not in attachment. You should learn what we are saying is that we should learn the difference between the two. So we should primarily go towards the mode of goodness. Yes, please.
What is the difference between attachment and affection?
Well, basically, attachment and affection is when you would perform your duties without any expectation of how they're going to treat you.
Without expecting anything in return.
Without expecting anything in return, which is basically what this is. So you would basically find out exactly how to serve them, and then you will find out what is the best way to serve them, and then you will do so with affection, and you will not be affected by how they treat you after you serve them in a certain way. If you're attached, then what will happen is you would always be taking decisions and based on how they treat you.
Okay. Oh, I see. How they treat me. Okay.
Yeah, very nice.
And now I have one request to you, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Can I? Prabhuji, because every Saturday I go out for the book distribution, I'm out full day, so I miss your class. Is it possible for you to do on Sunday, please?
I need to come back on this, Mataji. Not because of any other reason. It is just that I'm planning to give Srimad Bhagavatam and also Bhagavad Gita. I was planning to keep one day of the weekend for the Srimad Bhagavatam, the other for the Bhagavad Gita. So I can't give a commitment at this time because there's a whole bunch of devotees who are also involved. But I surely will take your words into consideration. Yeah, maybe we could work something out. Is there a time of? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, because I'm out whole day for books. I'm missing your class. Then I will be missing. So.
What time do you come back from books? Where are you? Basically, where are you? Where do you live?
I live in London, North London.
You're in North London, yeah.
And I go to Soho Street, Oxford Street, London, Soho Temple.
Sure. So
my whole day is gone for the books. So
no, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Maybe, yeah, that's just wonderful. I really wouldn't want to interfere with your service to Srila Prabhupada. But the point is that you come home what time? I'm just curious because I want to see what your schedule is. And if you don't mind, you could write to me. Could you kindly write to me? Because I think
I go
out part of the group.
I go out of the house 10:30 London time and come home around 6:30 London time in the evening. So practically whole day is gone.
Saturdays, yeah? So,
yeah, Saturday. I do twice a week, Friday and Saturday, both.
Okay, perhaps what we could do is in the future, when I'm setting up the Bhagavad Gita session, it's most likely going to be on a Sunday. You could join, and the Bhagavad Gita is basically also going to be in the same format. And what you could do is that if you have questions from Srimad Bhagavatam, the recordings on SoundCloud, you could listen to them and you could ask them questions. You could ask questions, but you could also participate in the Bhagavad Gita. I will think about this and I will let you know because there are other devotees who are also involved. We've been doing this for some time. So I will think about
I don't have the SoundCloud app on. Is it possible any other format I can get it?
It's also on YouTube. So
YouTube. If I have the address of the YouTube, then I can do.
Yeah, I think what you can do is you can write to me personally so that I can just add you and I could just request someone to assist you.
Thank you. I'll ask Saudamani Radhika to do that for me.
Yeah, of course, yes. She can help you. Yeah.
Hari bol. Thanks so much.
Not at all. Okay, so I think we've had a decent session in terms of time. And we'll continue again in the thank you very much for joining us. And I will make sure that the recordings of the past 3 weeks are available. I'll request the devotees to do it, and we'll move forward. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam.
Just one last request. Is it possible to have always on YouTube, Prabhu, instead SoundCloud?
I think it's done in both, yeah? Don't you think? I think it's done on both. I will check. I'll check and see. I'm sure it's done on both.
Prabhu, the link that comes is on SoundCloud. It doesn't. The YouTube link doesn't come when the recording.
Maybe what I will do is I will check into it. Perhaps both are being added, but just one link is being provided.
Yes,
yeah, because a lot of people.
Yeah, SoundCloud.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I was also searching in YouTube link, but I could not find the recent classes.
That's why.
Yes, no. For the last 3 weeks, we haven't updated. Last 2 weeks, they haven't been updated. So I don't think that's an issue. But I will get back to you with. I'll coordinate and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining. Hare
Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Bol.